My name is Don Saunders. I'm the author of The Knowledge. It's one book in a series of 15 books. The 15 books of knowledge came to me one morning in a very powerful and mysterious way. It's something that you have never heard before, I'm going to promise you. You've heard pieces of it, but you've never heard it this way. It changed my life. I dropped out of corporate America, decided that the only mission that I had for my life was to explain to people how life worked. So the series of 15 books is going to be called The Power of Knowing How Life Works, because that's what I share with all of the people that come to me. Now, I will tell you that people will tell you that you have a destiny or that you have a path that's already set for you. My goal is not to take any of those personal beliefs from you. So right in the very beginning, before I give you the actual punch, I'm going to tell you about my little box here. And I'm going to tell it to you because you're the teachers of the world. And when I talk to students, they understand this. You see, my goal is to share knowledge. Every time that a student looks at another human being, they should be looking at them as knowledge. Not as anything else in this world, but knowledge. When I look at you, I know that you have something to offer me. I should listen to you and share what I have. The box is simple. We have been taught traditional religions, politics, prejudice, and we carry baggage with us. And I ask everyone that listens, put all of that stuff away for right now. Just pack it in the box, and then put the lid back down. On the top of it, it says the power of knowing how life works, and then hold on to your box. Because I don't want any of that. It's not my job to try to convert you to anything. I'm not going to try to change your religious beliefs. I'm not going to give you a political rhetoric. That's not the purpose. That's not why the knowledge has arrived for 7 billion people. Now, if you're looking at this on YouTube, I'm going to ask a favor of you, because the power of video is strong. Let's make this go viral, because my only responsibility is not to convert, but to share with 7 billion people of the world how life works. And it's a powerful, powerful story, not because I'm the one that's telling you, but because the way it came through for all of you. So I'm going to ask you to stick with me while I go through the stories. I'm going to start right now, though. Here's the point. The brain. You've just seen on the news where they're going to spend $100 million mapping the brain. Well, here's a news flash. And this is all from the knowledge. This is not, I got to tell you, I was just a golfer, drinking beer, working for corporate America. I'm just an ordinary guy. And when this information came to me, I know that it's pure and it's genuine. And it came from no other place other than the source that we all tap into every day. So the brain, we've been told, produces our thoughts, feelings, beliefs, emotions, knowledge, information. It does not. The brain is simply a processor. It's a powerful processor that we only utilize, and you've heard this from many, many people, about 10% of it. But the reality is that someday, when the students that keep coming and evolving, they're going to use that processor to the maximum advantage. And it's going to be in ways that we can't even possibly imagine right now. So the number one nugget, the brain is simply a processor. The thoughts, feelings, beliefs, emotions, information come from out here. And I'm going to take time to explain how that works. Now keep in mind your box. You've all got your box. Think outside the box for the next few minutes, and always remember that you can open the box back up when we're done and take back whatever you want, because it belongs to you. The other thing, water has memory. Now I will tell you, when I had my experience, and that was a really powerful point, and I kept processing that, water has memory. And then I was speaking one day, and somebody came up to me and they said, well, you know that they've already proven that. No, I wasn't that well read when this all came to me. But the fact was, is Dr. Emoto over in Japan had already done a video that showed that water has memory. I had tears in my eyes when I looked at that video, because what it did was affirm the knowledge for me. And this happens to me every day. Something more gets affirmed. When Dr. Parrish showed up in my life, he affirmed a lot of the things. I keep asking him about things, and he says, "That's right, Don. That's what we found. That's what science has discovered." So water has memory. Another nugget for you, so that I keep your interest. The dominant thought always wins. The dominant thought always wins. Now you're going to say, well, of course, Don. Anybody that is really dedicated to their cause is going to win out over somebody that doesn't care, but I'm going to show you why that works and how it works. The science of it all. When I first started, my experience came to me November 17th, 2009 at 6:24 in the morning. And I'm going to get into that a little bit more. But for right now, I want to talk to you about the science, because everybody always says to me, "Don, that's very nice, but what does science have to prove in order to get the knowledge out to everybody?" And they're already doing it. Prior to my experience, I had no scientific background. The only reason I passed science in school was they needed me on the football team. Other than that, I had no idea about any of this stuff. Quantum physics, I couldn't even spell it. I mean, that's how normal and routine I was. And my wife of 40 years has been with me so that she can affirm to me, "Don, yeah, you knew nothing about science." So the reality is that science is catching up. We're watching Jay Leno one night, about a year and a half or 2 years ago. And he says, the scientists have just discovered these things called neutrinos. And I stopped and I listened. I was getting ready for bed, but I listened to what they were saying. Neutrinos are small particles that they've discovered that can penetrate matter. And again, the tears came out of my eyes. I looked at my wife and I said, "That's it. That's what the knowledge was teaching me, that these particles that exist out here, that contain our thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and emotions, can penetrate the human body." And I got excited. Now I get excited over things that most people probably wouldn't. But this is important for you to know, because you're going to go into those classrooms with a different look, I promise you, when you figure out how this all works. So here we've got these neutrinos. They penetrate matter. So I'm going back through. Okay, the mind doesn't produce thoughts. Thoughts come from out here. Water has memory. And now they're telling me about neutrinos that can penetrate the body. Wait a second. The body is made up of 70 to 90% water. Okay, I didn't know this, but there's 50 trillion cells in the human body. And the bigger you are, the more cells you have. The more water you can contain. The more memory you can hold. It started to make sense to me. All of this knowledge that came to me, I'm thinking, how do I put it all together and explain it to people? So we moved on through. And every day, I think about the insights that came to me and try to apply them to how this all works. Now, people say to me, "Well, Don, I never studied quantum physics. The important thing for you to understand is neither did I." I'm telling you in a way that you should be able to understand it if you're at the point in your life where you're awakening. And the good news is that everybody that walked in that door right there, because of what I have been manifesting, because of the journey that you happen to be on, is going to be relatively interested in what we're talking about. Because if you weren't, you wouldn't have come in the door. I can promise you, because of the way that it works. Now, the one thing that I want to really cover here is that this science stuff that's verifying and affirming the knowledge is real. And we talked about particles, neutrinos. Then we move along a little bit, And I also wrote in my book about the God particle. And no understanding of what that was. In March of 2011, I put it in my book for the final edit that they're going to soon discover the God particle. In July 4th of 2012, they announced that they had discovered the God particle. Now, the God particle was thought about since 1962. They knew there was something out there, something out here that they hadn't discovered yet. Little do they know, there's a lot out here that they haven't discovered yet. So the reality is that this God particle that they've discovered is like a magnet. It's called the Higgs boson, if you happen to have listened to any of your news. And that Higgs boson is like a magnet. And I'm going to discuss it in non-scientific terms. This Higgs boson that they discovered was so subatomic, so small, that it took a collider that runs for 17 miles in order to create this thing that they could see. The reason that's important is you are absolutely surrounded in your life by these subatomic particles, and they do not even know they exist yet. And you're going to say, well, Don, how do you know that? Because the knowledge brought this information for me to share with you. This is not something that I made up. I couldn't have made this up. This is reality. And the importance of it is if you don't know how this all works, and we're getting to that, you can't possibly evolve to the point where we're going to evolve to. And it's all happening. How many of you have students that walk around every day doing this? And they have their heads down, and they're not communicating with everybody. They have a person sitting right next to them, and their head's down, and they're texting them. Science believes that technology will lead to more technology. That's not going to happen. Technology is going to lead to no technology. And let me explain. You see, we're preparing for the evolution of humanity to not have to use technology at all to communicate. Pretty soon, this thing that is texting with, and I'm talking about in a few generations, will disappear. And because of the power of your minds, and because of how it works, which I'm still going to get to for you, I promise, because of that power, you will not need a device. You will communicate simply by standing here and thinking about the person you want to think about. And you can try this yourself. You can think about somebody, and if you're sincere about it and you focus about it, sometime in the future, they'll show up. And you'll say, I was just thinking about you. Or somebody will call you on the phone and they'll say, hi, I haven't talked to you in 3 months. I know, but I was just going to call you. It happens throughout our lives. And people just take that for granted, just like they do take for granted how life works. And the reality is, it works like this. You see, we're surrounded by particles. Those particles contain water. The scientists will call it hydrogen, oxygen, H2O. They're minute molecules of water. Water has memory. It has 440,000 information panels per molecule of memory. 440,000 information panels in one molecule that you can't even see. That's the thing that science hasn't discovered yet. They discovered the Higgs boson that attracts particles to it. They know water has memory. But the reality is in that memory are your thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and emotions in particle form. In partial form, by the way. And when we get into the little section that I'm going to share with you of what happens when we die, you can open up your boxes and take back all your personal beliefs at that point, and you can leave if you want, but I think you'll stick around. But the reality is that these particles are drawn together by a master particle. And one of the things that, when I was writing the book, I had to put in there was that the Big Bang Theory. is simply a theory. I wrote it on page 33 or 52, it's in there. And the theory that they've made is that this Big Bang, this mass, got overpowered with energy and exploded and the universe began. And in the book, and they just announced this the other day, by the way. This was in the news, you can Google it. They just announced that, I think we missed it. The Big Bang was not the beginning of the universe. The universe actually began 80 million years before the Big Bang. Another giggle for me. Because when I talk about my experience, I'm going to tell you that part of that experience was this. It showed me how the universe began, how we live in our physical form, and what happens when we die. The particles that I'm discussing, the pieces of your thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and emotions exist out here. And when you walk through this particle soup, just walking around, you're walking through everybody's particles. When you all came into the room, you brought your realities with you. Here's a question for you. How many of you have ever thought about how life worked? Raise your hands if you've ever thought, gee, how does that work? Or why did they die? Or how does this all work? Why do I die at age 80? How many have ever thought about that stuff? Everybody raise your hand if you've ever thought about it. Of course, we all have. I have too. I'm going to skip the science a little bit now, and I'm going to tell you how this knowledge came to me, and then I'm going to come back to these particles. Because if I don't tell you how it arrived, the reality is you'll never understand why it came through me. And I'm going to try to make it short because this is not about me, it's about the knowledge that sits behind me here. When I was 10 years old, I was poor and used to sleep out under the stars. And I'd look up in the sky and I'd simply say, can you tell me how this whole thing works? Because I wondered why I was poor and somebody else had lots of money to do everything they wanted to. And, you know, the typical thing that you're always going to get taught by your parents and all the people around you is that, well, you have to study hard, you have to work hard, you have to get ahead, you have to, well, I believed there was another answer. So every day of my life, I'd ask that question, not knowing that the very next day I was getting that answer. Because the next day after I asked the question, it would show me, okay, this is how life works today. And then I'd ask the question again at night, and it would show me the next day. And I became interested. But I didn't know how this all fit together. So fast forward, after learning about death from, burying 7 of my closest friends, all in different accidents when I was 16, 17 years old, losing my parents like everybody does, kept asking the question. I woke up one morning, November 17th, 2009, at 6 o'clock, and was paralyzed. Couldn't move. My personal thought was that this is scary, and I started to cry. She was laying right next to me, my wife was, but I couldn't yell out to her. I was paralyzed. The only thing I could see was the clock. So what happened after that? For the next 23 minutes, everything left from around me, just dissipated back into the universe. Now I know what it was. It was my old reality that was leaving me. And then, at exactly 6:24, it clicked to 6:24, because that's all I could see was the clock. And when it clicked, everything turned around and came back at me at the force of a hurricane. At first, I was panicked. I thought, is this it? Am I dead? Is this all over with? Because I didn't know, and I didn't know that it was going to end eventually. So I was scared to start with. But then I realized, wait a minute. Oh, interesting. It was showing me the answer to the question I'd asked my whole life. And I want to explain to you that I did not obsess on the question. I only asked it just before I went to bed at night, very calmly. Didn't really ever believe, I don't think, that an answer would come to me. Didn't think anybody was going to send me that answer, not in this way anyways. So here I am, 6:24, the clock is hung up, And all this stuff keeps coming at me. And I giggle a little bit, and I smile a little bit, and then I said, oh, wow, that's important, that's powerful. And then the clock clicked to 6:25. I jumped out of bed. No effect whatsoever. And I went, wow, whew, that was big. And I grabbed a piece of paper and a pencil, and I said, I think I've got it, not really understanding everything. And I put it on the sink, and I went to exercise. And when I was exercising, I went to the gym, where we always go, stood up on the elliptical machine, and then stood there for 90 minutes and didn't realize that 90 minutes had passed. And I was just taking all the insights and trying to sort through what had just happened to me. Had my eyes closed, but I wasn't asleep. When my eyes opened, I looked at the clock. It couldn't have been 90 minutes. But all the lights were flashing on the elliptical. Everything was past where it was supposed to be. And I got off. I checked the register to see when I checked in, and sure it was 90 minutes. So I go home. She meets me at the door, and she says, okay, what do you got? The reality was we sat down and cried for a while. And then the next day, I sat down and I typed 80,000 words. They just poured out of me. Things that I didn't even understand. A lot of it redundant. In fact, when the editor for my first book started looking at it, she just goes, we got a lot of redundancy in here. And I let her take out a lot of it, but I had her leave in a lot of it because there's things in the book that need to be understood. One of the things that if you read the book, you'll see a lot of is you and only you get to create your personal realities. You can, again, you've got your box. If you pray to a superior being for help for you, if you look at your family and your friends for personal help, I don't care. Because what you're doing is you're attracting particles. And I'm going to go back to the scientific stuff that we were talking about a little while ago. But when this knowledge arrived to me, being foreign to science, I didn't understand all of it, but when it started, the pieces started coming together. I used to sit watching TV, and she'll verify this, because when I sat and watched TV about it all, I used to giggle, because while I was watching TV, I wasn't paid attention to TV. I was just thinking about my insights. And then I'd start to laugh, and she'd say, well, what are you laughing about? And I said, you're never going to believe how that works. And I'm talking about relationships. I'm talking about your work. I'm talking about how students learn. I'm talking about every aspect of how life works. Hi. Hi. How are you doing? So the reality is that the answer's like this. These particles drawn together through this boson particle, remember neutrinos can penetrate the body. Well, part of those neutrinos are this boson particle. And when you walk through the particle soup and you sort of resonate, because you have in your system memory, water, when you resonate with these particles, all of a sudden you have created a thought that you like, simply from a piece of particle that came from what I call the universal consciousness. You can call it the God consciousness if you want. I'm real open. But the reality is this consciousness that surrounds us, you draw from. People wonder, how'd I end up as a teacher? When you're walking through your particle soup of life, one of these particles from a past teacher happens to come through you, it resonates with you, and you say, yeah, I'd like to be a teacher. Yeah, let me think about that. Yeah, that would be good. And then all of a sudden, all of the things in this universal consciousness start to come to you in these particle forms and start to grow so that your thought grows. And then pretty soon your thought gets really big. And then you start to get your path clearer because all of the things related to making you become a teacher start to fall into your path. They become part of your journey. And when that takes place, all of a sudden, you have started to create your reality built out of these particles that are inside you and outside you. And this is tough to visualize. I'm going to take you to like book number 9 right now. But what is right here is the same as what's right here. Now, when I get into book 12 and 15, I'm going to explain how the physical human form is actually a projection of your ego. because you've separated yourself from whatever term you want to use it, whether it be God or oneness or peace, love. The fact is you've broken away from that based on all of the particles that you've attracted, and now you're projecting an ego so that you project your physical self. I've already taken you into book 12 through 15. My apologies. I got to get you back to book number 1. But there is more to the story than being able to share with you for 60 minutes. So I want to make sure when you leave here, you don't say, "He didn't cover that." It's a long, long journey. But right now, for what you're learning right now, these particles, please understand, you're walking through particle soup every day. And when you get near somebody that has powerful energy about them, just always feeling good, always like I feel when I'm around Dr. Parrish, you can actually take your hands and you can start to feel the energy between your hands. That's because what's right there is the same as what's right here, if I'm explaining that okay for you. And the reality is that this is so subatomic right here that they haven't discovered it yet. But they're on their way to doing it. This brain mapping stuff that they're doing, I support it, because you need to know how the brain is processing this information in order to understand what's out here that it's processing. The only thing I'm hoping is that somebody in the government, before they spend $100 million, sees this video. Forgive my ego there, but the reality is, don't spend the money brain mapping if the answer is outside the brain. Learn both. Because when you start to realize that this energy, and again, I'm using earthly words when I talk about particles and energy, you got to forgive me, there's nothing else to be able to describe it. I've actually talked to neurosurgeons, talked to one neurosurgeon that came to me after a talk. He was actually the flight surgeon for the Apollo astronaut program. And he would talk to the astronauts when they get back, and they'd always have a little something different about them. And basically, he did 40,000 brain surgeries. And here's this guy, after I do a talk like this, comes up to me and he says, "I need to know." He said, "How did you get this information?" And when he had sat through the program, he says, "No," he says, "you got to tell me." He says, "You must have read this someplace." He says, "I've been studying my whole life to find these answers." And I said, "I don't know. I mean, all I can tell you is how it all happened, and you tell me how it works." So, reality was, though, is that we're standing talking, and I asked him a question. It's a powerful question. I looked at this man who had done all these brain surgeries, and I said to him, "Let me ask you something. Where do thoughts come from?" And he looked at me pretty much like you're all looking at me right now. And he says, "We don't know." Now, here's a man that's done all these brain surgeries, and they don't know where thoughts come from. And the reason they don't know is because there has been no base for them to draw their knowledge from. Meaning that there's nothing in the universal database discussing the quantum physics that take them to the next level of evolution. And remember, I'm telling you that you're drawing all of your thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and emotions from the surrounding universal consciousness, but that has to be filled with thoughts. Now stick with me on this, because this is very, very important. They had no reference point to draw from. So they have to take science in little bitty pieces, and then when they get a piece, then they all work on it, like the scientist at CERN in England. I don't know if you know, that's where they discovered the God particle. They spent $10 billion trying to find this one little subatomic particle. And there's tens of thousands of physicists that contribute to this research. And they don't understand why it takes so long. Well, there's no knowledge base for them to draw from. They can't sit and focus like a think tank and draw the information that nobody's ever discovered before. Does that make sense to you? I mean, this is powerful, powerful stuff. So, why are you here? The whole point of letting you come here is to understand that these particles of thoughts, feelings, beliefs, emotions that penetrate us, that we create our reality in, are the same thing that your students, if you're a teacher, are trying to grab onto. Except they're not accepting all of the information we're giving them. They're frustrated, they're tired. And these new generation of kids knows that there's something else that they should be learning, not the traditional math and science that we're trying to teach them. So their conflict, and you're right in the middle of it. Because these kids are confused. I look into their eyes of a kid that's 12, 13 years old. They have no interest in communicating the way that you and I communicate because they've already started the evolutionary process. And that evolutionary process is going to speed up. More and more people are waking up to this information. And the reason being is that the people that have come before us were starting to wake up. So when they died, and keep up with me now because I'm going to step into what happens when we die. When they died, all this reality of particles that they've built around them, they redeposit them back into the universe. And that becomes the database. Science will tell you that the universe is expanding, but they can't tell you why. The reason it is the population has expanded. And more thoughts are gathered up, more people die, more disperse their information back into the universe, and now we have a database that we can draw from to get the answers that are going to help us evolve faster. And that's where the kids are caught today. The kids today are caught right smack dab in the middle of the evolution process. And we're sitting here, especially at my age, I look back at these kids doing this texting stuff, and the first thought I ever had was, what a shame. They're not communicating, they're not talking anymore. No, they're evolving. They're evolving at a faster pace. Take a look at the technology and how fast it evolves. Let me use this as an example. The Wright brothers, whenever they decided they were going to fly, they got their knowledge, believe it or not, from the birds. They looked up in the sky, they saw the birds flying, they said, we could do that. So then they started manifesting how they could do that, and they eventually flew. And now what do we have? We have Boeing and McDonnell Douglas filled with people that walk in there to work every day, and every time they walk in there, they carry their realities, and guess what their realities are? Their realities that they've drawn to them, the information that they've drawn to them, is to build a bigger, faster, smarter airplane. And if they figure out how to do that, they're going to get paid more money. So all these people that walk into Boeing, once they get under the umbrella of this huge plant, guess what they're doing? They're tapping each other for this information. Just like we are in this room. I'm pulling from all of you. You don't know it right now, but we're going to have a question and answer session, and so save your questions because we're going to get through all of that stuff, but we'll stop filming at that point. So I just want you to know if you're watching this at home, you won't get their questions. You can get a hold of me here in Lake Las Vegas at the Beam Institute. You got to throw in a commercial every once in a while. But the reality is these people from Boeing are building bigger, faster tanks that float in the air. And they do it because over the evolution of earthly time, they have been able to get smarter and smarter and smarter because people die and they put their realities back into the universe, and all of a sudden the database that they're drawing from is smarter. Does that make sense? But also understand that we haven't evolved to the point where we can telepathically communicate because we've never done that before. Nobody knows how to do that. But they didn't know how to build an automobile at one time. They used to just ride horses and carriages. And then when people learned how to build automobiles, they put information back in, and before you know it, 5 or 6 generations later, they're driving at 190 miles an hour. And that's because they're able to draw the information. So when you're sitting in your classrooms with your students, and you look at those kids, and they look like they have blank stares on them. Become a student. Stand there and listen to each individual student, because what they're drawing from today is a different database than what you drew from when you went through school. Now, a lot of the teachers get frustrated. I talked to a lot of teachers this morning that came by, and their questions are always the same. Am I on the right path? There is nothing more important that you can do in your life than to be a teacher. And the fact is, all you have to understand is how it works to be able to apply how it works to the people you're dealing with. Those happen to be your students. Those are the administrators. You're right in the middle. The administrators want you to do a lesson plan. The students don't want to take your lesson plan anymore. So understanding how it works, these particles keep coming in. Fill your classroom with positive particles. You all know this because it happens to me when I go to speak at schools. A teacher will invite me in, and she'll say, I want you to speak at 7, I want you to speak at 8:45, and I want you to speak at 11 o'clock. And by the way, my 8:45 class, they're disruptive. You won't be able to teach them a thing. And my 10:45 class, ooh, those kids, now they're going someplace. But the reality is that when you have an entire class, you think that you've put them together, they've put themselves together. The attraction of these particles pulls that class together, and that's how they learn. Because they're in this class, these particles are floating around, they feed off of each other, and I'm not going to give you the answer, I'm just going to tell you how it works. And that's the fact that these classrooms are filled with these particles from the kids' realities, and you're trying to stand there and you're trying to teach each class the same way. Because administration says they all have to learn this particular knowledge. Then you get frustrated. Then you think, am I really doing good? Yeah, you are. But it's not your fault if the kids don't relate to exactly what you're trying to teach. Because these particles that are in each of these rooms make a difference in how they learn. Let me give you another example. Sports teams. This is a good one, and I had a coach challenge me on this one day, which I loved. The fact is, a sports team, if you're looking at this, coaches, pay attention, will say that they have a home team advantage when their teams play at home. UNLV was a great example, and we are in Las Vegas, by the way. UNLV was a great example. Their basketball team won like 14 in a row at home and lost 13 in a row on the road, so they were convinced it's the home team, but they didn't know why. When the people went to Thomas and Mack Center to watch UNLV play, they took with them the reality that UNLV was going to win. And the UNLV players thought they were going to win. And pretty soon, the teams that were coming into the home court thought, we're going to lose because we're at their home court. And it was these particles that fill that stadium. Every sports stadium is the same way. So the coach challenged me one day. He said, afterwards, he came up to me and said, I didn't want to interrupt you in your presentation, but he said, how about when we lose at home? I said, let me ask you a question. When you lose at home, do the fans expect you to win? Well, no, because we usually lose to a superior team. When those people go into that stadium, they say, oh, we haven't got a chance, but we're here to support the kids. Then the players are in the locker room and they say, that other team, they've won 14 in a row. There's no way we're going to beat them, even if we are at home. So they get those particles stirred up. They walk out there and the fans have the same particles, the same thoughts, and pretty soon they produce exactly what everybody thought they would produce, a loss. Because the particle soup has been shifted to a negative rather than a positive. So the point being is that your environment does affect the overall process that you use for your positive or negative thoughts. Now, people are always telling you to think positive, but they've never told you the reason why. And now you know. The reason is because if you focus on positive particles that you walk in through the soup, you're going to attract the positive particles. And this isn't This is far beyond the law of attraction, the secret, all of that. I got it all. I got it. I never read that before my information. I read it afterwards, said, okay, that's nice. They told you if you think positive, you're going to attract positive stuff. Okay, how did that work? Now you know. These subatomic particles are at work. They store your thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and emotions. You have water in your system. Your water becomes your memory. And by the way, there is structured water. That was in the knowledge, and I didn't even know what it was. I'm still looking for it. Structured water is water that has not been changed chemically or distilled or processed to get out all the germs. Now the problem is that if you drink structured water, you're drinking all the bacteria that comes along with it, and that's probably not good for you either. So I still drink bottled water just like everybody else does. But I'd love to find somebody that could do structured water, get out all the impurities, because that's the answer. It's funny how life teaches you things that you didn't even know. I grew up as a farm boy. We had well water. My mother always used to put chlorine in the well to kill the bacteria. But I worked on a farm next door, and when I went over there, their water was rancid tasting. But these kids in the family, there was 3 of them, 2 girls and a boy, always drank it since the time they were little. They never noticed that it tasted terrible. It was just part of what they drank. When I went over there, I used to have, and we didn't have bottled water in those days. I used to have to drink it because I had nothing else to drink, but it was terrible. Now I know. It was structured water. And so what? Here's the thing. Those 3 kids were always the valedictorians in the class. They were so smart. He tried to teach me French up in the hay mow when we were packing hay, and he'd rattle it off, and I said, how did you learn it like that? He says, oh, I just learned it. They were geniuses, and now I know why. Because they had, from the very beginning of their lives, drank structured water, which had maximum memory, so everything that was taught to them, they learned. It's powerful, powerful stuff. What time we got? Just about time here. Is that 20 after? We're good. Now, remember, dominant thoughts always win. And the reason they win is because when you manifest that you're going to win, the particles just pour on top of you. You can't lose if the other person is walking around in neutral, and 99% of the people in the country walk around in neutral every day. Neutral is not a bad thing. It's not bad to walk around in neutral. Neutral is when you get out of bed every morning, you put your feet on the floor, you go do something constructive, you go home at night, you watch a little TV, maybe read a little book, and you go and you put your feet back up again, you take a nap, you go to sleep, and then all of a sudden, the next day you do the same thing over again. That's what I mean by neutral. That's what 99% of the people do. But there was people just this morning, hi Anya, they came to me, and they're waking up. They're so far out in front of the curve that they can talk to me about all this stuff just like they know it. I am nobody special. I'm just going to tell you. I'm an ordinary guy. I've said that enough times already. You are the special people because you can attract these particles to you. You can change your life starting right now. And that's what you want to teach your kids. They get to choose how they react and bring particles to them. And if you have a focus that you really want to be the very, very best teacher, it'll all come to you. The journey will come to you. The doors will open. Here's a very important point, though. There is no time in the universe. This is a big one. There is no time in the universe. Don, what are you talking about? I got a watch on. I looked at my calendar this morning. Don't tell me there's no time. No. Humanity made time as a data point to mark our lives as we go through it. I challenge everyone, if we had the total understanding that there was no time, we would not prepare ourselves through stopping work, through retiring, through getting ready to die at an average age of, I think it's 80 now. If we weren't told that the average age for death was 80, we would just keep perpetually living. but we're so programmed about time. We move around, we stress ourselves, we lock ourselves up based on time. So the reality is when I tell you there's no time in the universe, when you pray, or when you manifest, or when you meditate, you are asking the universe, the overall consciousness, the God consciousness, your superior being, whatever you're doing, whether you're praying or whatever you're doing, you're asking a source that doesn't run on time. So when you ask for something, and we all do this, oh, gee, I would love to have a lot of money. Or, gee, I would love to be a teacher. It doesn't show up on an earthly time frame. And people get frustrated. So what they do is they give up. So if they manifest based on earthly time, and there's no time at the source they're manifesting from, the confusion in the world is, I've tried that, Don, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work on a clock. All I'm telling you, this is powerful, powerful stuff. It's genuine, it's pure, it's how it works. I don't expect every person in this room to grab onto the information. And notice I didn't say theory, because it's not theory. I changed my life to share this with you. It's so critical and so important that people understand how this works, because if we don't understand how it works, we can't follow the evolution that's coming. And please do. So just leave here with your boxes. You can open them back up, take back all of your traditional beliefs, but at least add into your reality the possibility that our brains are simply processors. And they're going to prove it to you. They're spending this $100 million, and they're going to prove that they don't know where thoughts come from. And this constant rehashing of the fact that there's a subconscious, point to it for me. Where is it? Now, there's an unconscious. And the reason, and I'm going to just share this with you because I don't dream. When I go to bed at night, I shut my processor down completely. I have REM sleep very deep. She'll tell you she could clap her hands and not wake me up. Yeah. Because I am so deep in my sleep that I've shut the processor down. I'm not bringing in all of this extemporaneous information from outside, because most of you sleep lightly and you process all night long. And then sometimes you process something that sticks with you, but it's not a complete thought because you're not focused on it. And therefore, you wake up in the morning and say, geez, I had this weird dream. I was riding this alligator and, I had pink shoes on. And it's just because they're all pieces of particles they're transporting through your processor. That's what dreams are. So if you try to analyze a dream, good luck. Unless you focus in the middle of your dream, and then all of a sudden, it becomes part of your reality. And then you understand it. And then you probably wake up and say, oh, I guess I got to think about that a little bit more. It's fun stuff. So we're done. We're going to ask questions and answers in just a minute. But I just want to tell you, this knowledge basically will be distributed. I have to do this for the TV. At the Beam Institute, my name's Don Saunders. And if you want me, you can find me. I don't have to give you my website right now, even though I will. It's Don at thepowerofknowinghowlifeworks.com. Find me, ask me questions. I'm free with the information. That's why we're going to put it on YouTube. Because unless we get people understanding, 7 billion people in the world need to know how this all works, and then you can make your choices from there. But until you understand how it works, you can't make proper choices. So thank you for listening. I appreciate it very much.